The jungle moon of Varel 7 was always hot. Always loud and always dangerous. Jake, a human mechanic, stepped carefully into the alien market, his boots crunching over dust and strange fruit peels. He had been to a dozen worlds before, but this place felt different, like every eye was watching him. Stalls stretched on both sides, selling weird glowing meat, whispering plants, and alien weapons that hummed like they were alive. Strange smells filled the air, burned spice, oil, and something wild like wet fur and smoke. Jake kept his head down, pulling his jacket tighter, trying to stay unnoticed. But humans were rare out here, especially alone, and everyone noticed him. He stopped at a stall with machine parts, trying to trade some Earth-made tools. The alien seller, a tall insect-like being, clicked its mandibles and examined the wrench. Jake offered. They were about to make a deal when a loud snarl echoed through the market. The crowd turned as two bulky alien males began fighting, their claws flashing in the air. Jake stepped back quickly, not wanting to get involved, but the fight moved too fast. One of the aliens shoved the other and slammed right into Jake. Jake hit the ground hard, gritting his teeth, his tool bag scattering. The crowd gasped, not because he was hurt, but because someone stepped in. A tall alien female, muscular and graceful, moved like lightning between Jake and the others. She raised her arm and roared, a sound that made the crowd freeze. The two males backed off immediately, snarling but obeying. Then she turned to Jake. Her skin was dark violet, her eyes glowing gold with vertical slits. She didn't speak, didn't ask if he was okay. Instead, she leaned in and sniffed him slowly, like an animal inspecting prey. Jake froze, confused, unsure if she was going to bite or help him. Then, without warning, she rubbed her bare forearm. Along the side of his neck, her scent was strong, earthy, spicy, almost magnetic. The moment she did it, the crowd gasped again, louder this time. Even the stall owners stepped back, whispering in alien tongues. Jake stood up, wiping dust from his clothes. What the hell was that? He muttered. The alien female looked straight into his eyes and said in a deep, calm voice, "You are mine now." Then she walked away, just like that, like nothing happened. Jake stood there in shock, heart racing, the crowd still staring. At him, an alien merchant nearby leaned closer and whispered, "You've been marked by a Tavari female." Jake blinked. "Marked? What does that mean?" The merchant hissed. "It means she's claimed you, human-like territory, like mate." Jake laughed nervously. No, that can't be real." But the merchant just nodded. "You'll see soon enough." Jake tried to keep moving, but the scent on his neck was strong and getting stronger. Some alien females glanced at him but quickly turned away, their eyes wide. No one came near him anymore. No one spoke to him. He walked through the market, but it felt like walking through a cage with invisible bars. Something had changed, and he didn't understand the rules. Back at his small ship, Jake tried scrubbing his neck with water, with cleanser, with alcohol. Nothing worked. The scent stayed, deep and warm, like it had soaked into his skin. His alien neighbor, a furry old creature named Blent, knocked on his ship door that evening. Jake opened it, still annoyed and confused. "Blent, do you know what's going on?" Blent sniffed the air and took 2 steps back. "Oh no," he said. "She marked you." Jake groaned. "So what? It's just some weird alien habit, right?" Blent shook his head slowly. "To the Tavari scent is law. If she marked you in public, it means she claimed you as her mate or property. No one will challenge her unless they want to fight." Jake rubbed his face. "I didn't agree to this." Blent gave a sad chuckle. "That doesn't matter to her kind, only strength does, and she must have seen something in you." Jake couldn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he remembered the Tavari female's eyes, those gold eyes that stared through. Him? Why him? What did she see? What did she want? In the silence of his cabin, one thought kept repeating. He wasn't in control anymore, and somewhere out there she was watching, waiting, or worse, planning what came next. Jake didn't leave his ship for 2 whole days. He stayed inside, cleaning tools that didn't need cleaning, fixing things that weren't broken, and checking the same messages over and over. But deep inside, he wasn't. Scared of the Tavari female hurting him, He was scared because a part of him felt curious. That scent on his neck still lingered no matter how hard he scrubbed. It didn't feel dirty anymore. It felt like a symbol, a warning sign, and a mystery. He just didn't know what it truly meant. On the third day, there was a loud knock at his ship's door, not a polite one, more like a challenge. Jake grabbed a small wrench for defense and opened the door slowly. There she was, standing tall under the twin suns, arms crossed, gold eyes sharp and steady. She didn't wait for permission. She walked right into the ship like she belonged there. Jake backed up, heart racing again. "What do you want?" The Tavari sat down on one of the crates like it was a throne. "You were not in the market," she said calmly. Jake frowned. "Is that a problem?" She tilted her head. "You were claimed. You belong under my protection." He crossed his arms. "I didn't ask for protection. I didn't ask for anything." She gave a low growl, not angry, but firm. "You survived. You stood your ground. You didn't run from the fight, that's why I chose you." Jake stared at her, confused. "You chose me? Like I'm a tool you can just pick up?" She stood slowly and stepped closer, her scent growing stronger with every step. Jake didn't move, but his grip on the wrench tightened. She looked at the wrench, then looked into his eyes. "You can strike me if you want, but it will not change the bond." Jake hesitated, then slowly lowered the wrench. "Why me? Why not one of your own people?" She paused for a moment before answering. "My kind only respects strength, but they lack depth. You have both." Jake blinked, unsure whether that was a compliment or a trap. She stepped back, showing respect this time. "I am Rin Shah, daughter of the Tavari war leader Kravith." Jake nodded slowly. "I'm Jake, mechanic from Earth. No royal blood here." She didn't smile, but her voice softened slightly. "Your name is Strong." Jake sat down across from her, still, tense. "Listen, Rinsha, I'm not some trophy, I'm not some warrior prize." She nodded. "You are not. You are something new." Before Jake could say more, a voice came through his ship's outside speaker. "Human," it said in a harsh, deep tone. "Come out and face me." Rinshaw's eyes narrowed, and she stood up fast. "Stay inside," she said, then stormed out. Jake rushed to the small viewing screen. Outside, another Tavari female stood, taller than Rinsha, scarred and furious looking. The challenger shouted, "You dare claim a human? He has no claws, no fangs, no glory." Rinsha growled low. "He stood when others fled. His heart is louder than your roars." The challenger raised a sharp blade and pointed it at Rinsha. "Then defend your claim before the suns fall." Jake's stomach twisted. "Are you serious? They're going to fight over me?" Blent, his alien neighbor, had warned him. Tavari bonding is not romance, it is battle. Jake ran outside, standing between them. "Stop, you don't need to do this." Rinsha gently pushed him back. "I must, or the others will keep coming." Jake looked at her bleeding pride and firm jaw and realized something. This wasn't just about a scent or a claim. It was about who she was, what she stood for. And now, it involved him too. The challenge was accepted. The fight would happen the next night under the stars. Rinshaw left without saying goodbye, and Jake sat alone in the dark for hours. His mind raced with questions. Why did she risk so much for him? Why did her gaze linger every time she looked at him, and why did he feel angry that someone else wanted to take him away from her? That night, Jake didn't sleep. He thought about Earth, about humans and choices, about freedom. But he also thought about strength. Not the kind that breaks bones, but the kind that keeps a promise. He didn't know where this bond with Rinshaw would go, but one thing was clear. She didn't want to own him. She wanted to protect him. And maybe, just maybe, that was something worth protecting too. The sky burned red that evening. Twin suns sank below the jungle ridges of Virel 7, and the third moon, a massive blood-colored orb, rose slowly over the alien trees. It was called the Blood Moon by the Tavari, and it only appeared once every 6 cycles. To most, it was a symbol of fear. To the Tavari, it was a perfect night for combat. A sacred night for proving strength, claiming dominance, and deciding who had the right to protect. or possess. Jake stood at the edge of the dueling circle, surrounded by Tavari of all sizes, shapes, and armor. None of them looked at him kindly. To them, he was just a soft human. No claws, no scales, no battle scars, but their eyes flicked nervously to the mark on his neck. Rincha's scent still lingered, and that made him dangerous by association. Beside him stood Blent, his old alien neighbor wearing ceremonial beads. Jake whispered. "She doesn't have to do this," Blent replied. "She must. If she wants them to respect you, she has to earn it with blood." In the center of the circle stood Rincha, tall and calm, her body painted in black stripes and warrior symbols. She held no weapons. Tavari didn't use tools in bond duels. Her opponent, Vexiri, the challenger from the day before, towered over her and cracked her knuckles. The crowd pounded their fists on the ground rhythmically, calling for the duel to begin. A horn made from a hollowed-out beast skull blew loudly, and the fight began. Vexiri lunged first, claws slashing like daggers. Rincha dodged, barely, her footwork fast and smooth. Jake held his breath, watching the blur of bodies twist and leap through the red dust. Vexiri struck Rincha across the ribs, leaving a slash of dark blood. Rincha winced but didn't slow down. She spun and slammed her shoulder into Vexiri's chest, sending her skidding backward. The crowd roared. Jake wanted to yell, to run in and stop it, but he knew it wasn't his fight. This was their way, their law, and interfering would only make it worse. Rincha took another hit, this one to her leg, and staggered. Vexiri grinned, sensing weakness, and charged again. But Rincha suddenly dropped low and swept Vexiri's feet out from under her. With a fierce roar, she leaped and pinned the challenger to the ground, claws against her throat. Silence fell. Then Rincha let out a long growl that echoed across the jungle. It was done. The duel was over. Jake ran to her as the crowd began to cheer and scatter. Rincha was bleeding from 3 places, breathing hard but standing proud. Jake reached out to help, and this time she didn't push him away. She leaned on him slightly, just enough to show trust. He asked, "Are you okay?" She nodded. "I am now." He helped her back to his ship, supporting her with one arm. Along the way, no other Tavari even looked at them. The scent mark on Jake's neck might have been a warning before. Now, after the duel, it was something more, proof that he was chosen, protected, and not to be challenged again. Inside the ship, Jake sat her down and cleaned her wounds as best he could. She watched him silently, her eyes softer than he'd ever seen. When he was done, she said, "I should not have bled for you, but I did." Jake paused. "Why?" She looked away, then whispered, "Because you made me feel like more than a fighter." Those words stuck in Jake's mind all night. He lay awake, thinking about Earth customs, Tavari traditions, and what it meant to belong to someone. Rincha wasn't trying to own him. She had risked everything to make the others leave him alone. And when she bled for him, it wasn't about power, it was about choice. But was Jake ready to make his choice too? The next morning, Jake walked outside with a new thought in his heart. Rincha stood in the sunlight, arms crossed, still fierce, still proud. He walked up to her, took a deep breath, and said, "I still don't understand everything, but I'm not running away." She blinked, surprised. "You would stay?" He nodded. "Not because you marked me, but because I want to understand you." For the first time since they met, Rincha gave him a small smile. Not a warrior's grin, not a challenge, but something real. And that smile, simple and rare, felt stronger than any scent or battle. Jake had crossed a line, not into ownership, but into something else. Something neither human nor Tavari had words for yet. The days after the blood moon were quiet but heavy. No one challenged Rincha anymore, and Jake could walk through the market without stares or threats. But peace didn't mean clarity. Inside his ship, Jake still struggled with what had happened. Yes, he was safe now. Yes, Rincha had won for him. But what did it mean for him? His freedom, his future, his choices? Rincha came by daily, bringing strange fruits, battle salves, or silent company. She never demanded, never forced, but her presence was constant. Jake appreciated her loyalty, her strength, but also feared the invisible chain growing between. Then one evening he finally spoke, his voice tense. "Rinsha, what exactly do you expect from me?" She blinked, not with anger but confusion. "I expect nothing you do not wish to give." He sighed, standing near the ship window. "Then why do you act like I already belong to you?" She stepped forward, slow and careful. "Because I claimed you, yes, but not as a possession, as a protector." Jake turned sharply. "But I didn't ask for a protector." She tilted her head. "You didn't resist either." Jake went quiet, because she was right. He hadn't pushed her away. But now it wasn't just about alien customs, it was about something deeper, something unspoken between them, and he couldn't move forward until it was clear. "I need to know," Jake said, slowly. "If I stay with you, is it because I want to or because I was marked like a piece of territory?" Rinsha looked at him long and hard, then said something unexpected. "Then I will remove my claim." Jake's eyes widened. "You can do that?" She nodded slowly. "I will visit the fire pools tomorrow and burn away my scent from your skin." Jake didn't sleep that night. His mind spun with thoughts he had never faced before. If Rinsha gave up the mark, if the scent disappeared, he'd be free again, free to go back to his old life, to Earth, to meaningless repairs and quiet loneliness. But somewhere in his heart, the idea of her not visiting him anymore made his chest ache. The next morning, Jake waited outside the fire pools, hidden behind rocks. He watched as Rinsha entered the steamy cave, carrying nothing but a small bone vial. She knelt before the sacred fire, opened the vial, and poured it over a rock. Blue smoke hissed and curled around her as the scent burned away. Then she stood and walked out slowly, no expression on her face. Jake stepped forward and called out, "You did it." She turned to him, her voice quiet. "Yes. Now no one will stop you. You are free." But he didn't feel free, he felt hollow. She began to walk away, but Jake stopped her. "Wait." She turned, eyebrows raised. He took a deep breath. "I don't want to be claimed by force, but I don't want to lose you either." She tilted her head again, listening carefully. Jake walked closer. "If I choose to stay with you, not as your property, but as your partner, would you accept that?" Rinsha was silent for a long moment, then slowly unstrapped the clan medal from her belt. She held it up and let it fall into the fire behind her. "I reject my right to claim by tradition," she said. "If you stay by your own will." Jake stared at the fire, then back at her. Everything was different now. No scent, no bond, no rule. Just them. He reached out his hand, and Rinsha looked at it like it was a strange weapon. Then she smiled and took it in hers, rough and warm. Later that night, they sat on the roof of his ship under the starlit sky. They didn't speak much, but there was no awkwardness. Rinsha glanced at him and said, "You confuse me, human. You are soft yet brave, weak yet unbreakable." Jake chuckled. "You're the first person to ever call me both weak and unbreakable." She leaned her head back and let out a low laugh, something rare and strange from a Tavari. "Perhaps that's why I fought for you," she said, "because you are not like us, and still, you stand with us." The jungle around them buzzed with night sounds, but Jake didn't feel alone anymore. He didn't feel owned either. He felt chosen, and more importantly, he had chosen back. A week passed since Rinsha gave up her clan medal and her claim. Jake felt lighter somehow, as if a silent pressure had lifted from the air. He still walked beside her, shared meals and fixed broken machines in the village. But now, it was all by choice, not tradition, not scent, not law. The Tavari villagers began treating him differently, not with fear or suspicion, but with curiosity and respect. But just when it seemed like things were finally calm, a message came from the stars. A human ambassador was arriving. Jake read the message twice, not believing it at first. Earth's diplomatic ships rarely came to places like HFY, but now someone from his own world was on the way. Rinsha watched him read the message with silent eyes. "Will you leave with them?" she asked. Jake hesitated. "I don't know." 3 days later, the ambassador's ship landed near the Tavari jungle cliffs. It was a sleek silver cruiser, loud and polished, so different from the dusty market and forest vines. Jake stood among the villagers as the ramp lowered and out walked Ambassador Reeves, tall, sharp-suited and wearing mirrored glasses. The ambassador's eyes scanned the crowd, then locked on Jake. "Jake Forrester?" he said with a practiced smile. "Earth has been looking for you." Jake stepped forward, heart pounding. Reeves looked him up and down, then glanced at Rinshaw, who stood beside Jake like a silent mountain. "Interesting," Reeves said. "Is that the Tavari who marked you?" Jake blinked, surprised. "How do you know about that?" "We monitor interspecies contact," Reeves replied smoothly. "Your name came up when news of the Blood Moon duel reached the council." He lowered his voice. "And now they want answers." Later that evening, Jake sat in a temporary tent with Reeves and two alien translators. The ambassador leaned forward. "We're in negotiations with the Tavari Council for a possible alliance." Jake nodded slowly. "And you think I'm part of that now?" "You are part of it," Reeves said. "You're the first human in recorded history to be claimed, released, and still remain with a Tavari female voluntarily." Jake looked down at his hands. "I didn't ask for any of this." "But it happened," Reeves replied. "And the way you handled it, without conflict, with empathy, it matters more than you think." Reeves placed a hand on his shoulder. "We want you to speak at the summit next week, in front of both governments." Jake's mind reeled. "I'm not a diplomat. I'm a mechanic," Reeves smiled. "Maybe that's why they'll listen to you." When Jake told Rinsha about the summit, her expression didn't change, but her scent grew heavier. She said, "They will not respect you if you walk in as prey." Jake nodded. "Then I'll walk in as something they don't expect." The day of the summit came quickly. In a massive stone chamber carved into the cliffs, Tavari elders stood on one side, and human delegates on the other. Jake walked in the center, not in uniform, not in armor, but wearing simple work clothes, stained with oil and soot. He stood before both groups and took a deep breath. "I didn't come here to speak for humans," he began, "and I don't speak for the Tavari either." He looked at Rinshaw in the crowd, her eyes calm, her stance proud. "I only speak for what happened between us," he continued. "I was marked without asking, yes," he said, "but I stayed after she gave me the freedom to walk away." He paused, letting the silence sink in. "She didn't claim me to control me," he said. "She claimed me to protect me. And when I asked to stand beside her as an equal, she accepted." He turned to both councils. "That is what unity should look like." The chamber remained still for several seconds, then one Tavari elder slowly raised a clawed hand in salute. Others followed, and then a human delegate stood and clapped. Soon, the room filled with quiet applause, not loud, not dramatic, but genuine. After the summit, Reeves approached Jake again. "You did well," he said. "The council is impressed. They want to study your case as a new model for interspecies bonding." Jake raised an eyebrow. "A model? I'm not a lab rat," Reeves chuckled. "You're a symbol, whether you like it or not." Jake turned and saw Rinshaw waiting for him near the cliff's edge. He looked back at Reeves. "Let them study all they want, but I've made my choice." And with that, he walked away from politics, from titles, from old systems. He walked toward someone who saw him not as a species or a subject, but as a partner. That night, Jake sat beside Rinshaw under the stars again. He whispered, "They want to turn us into an example." Rinshaw leaned close. "Let them, as long as you stay." Jake smiled and took her hand. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, and he meant it with every part of his soul. Days passed since the summit, but the effect still echoed through the village. For the first time, Tavari elders walked side by side with human diplomats. Trade began to flow, warriors stood down, and even laughter crossed species lines. But while politics blossomed, something more personal stirred between Jake and Rinshaw. It was no longer about scent or tradition. It was about something deeper. A silent pull that grew with every glance, every word, every choice. One morning, Rinshaw approached Jake with something wrapped in animal hide. She didn't speak, just placed it gently in his hands. Jake opened it and saw a small carved disc made of red stone. It had symbols etched around the edge, and a hollow circle in the middle. "What is it?" he asked softly. Rinsha looked into his eyes. "It is a bonding token for the ceremony," Jake blinked. "You mean, like a wedding?" Rinsha tilted her head. "Not like yours, it's older, more sacred. The bond is chosen, not ordered. It can only be done if both partners give a mark, not just one." Jake's fingers tightened around the disc. "So, you'd be marked too?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, by your touch, your scent, your choice." For a long moment, Jake said nothing. Then he looked at her with a slow smile. "Let's do it." Preparations began that same evening. Tavari villagers decorated the forest path with glowing moss and silver-threaded leaves. The fire pits were lit, and the air buzzed with energy. But unlike human weddings, there were no chairs, no music, no crowd of guests, just fire, wind, earth, and sky. The ancient witnesses, Jake stood near the center stone, wearing simple clothes, and the red disc hanging on a cord around his neck. Rinsha emerged from the shadows in ceremonial paint, streaks of black and silver across her arms and cheeks. In her hand she held a small clay jar, tightly sealed. She stepped into the circle, her eyes never leaving his. The elder overseeing the bond stepped forward, her voice low but powerful. "The one who gave scent, now gives soul," she said. "The one who received now offers back." Jake stepped forward first, his heart pounding. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cloth stained with engine grease and wildflower. "Oil?" He pressed it against Rinsha's bare shoulder gently, letting it soak into her skin. "This is from my world," he whispered. "It's not sacred, but it's me." Rinsha took a breath, then opened the clay jar. Inside was the last of her old scent blend, one she had used to mark him the day they first met. But this time she didn't rub it on him. Instead, she poured it into the fire, letting the smoke rise between them. "Let the old claim burn," she said. "Let the new bond rise." Then she reached out and touched his chest, just above the heart. The mark wasn't physical, but it burned through him all the same. Not pain, not magic. Something human, something real. Acceptance, unity, trust. The elder stepped back, nodded once and whispered, "It is done." Jake and Rinsha stood in the circle as the fire crackled and sparks danced into the night. No cheering, no applause, just silence filled with meaning. When they stepped out of the circle, something had changed. Not just between them, but around them. The Tavari villagers looked at Jake with different eyes now. Not as a claimed outsider, but as one of them. Later they sat alone by the edge of the cliff, the moonlight painting silver lines on the stone. Rinsha leaned her head on Jake's shoulder. "You gave me your scent," she said softly. "Not because you had to, but because you chose to." Jake nodded. "And you gave up everything just to give me a chance to decide." She reached for his hand. "Now, we both carry each other's mark." Jake looked down at their fingers laced together. "Not a chain," he said. "A connection," she smiled gently. "A bond." They stayed like that for a long time. No words, no rules. Just two beings from different worlds sitting under the same stars. And in the quiet night air, surrounded by fireflies and wind, a new kind of love was born. Not forced, not owned, not expected, but chosen, together. The days after the bond ceremony felt different, not because of loud celebrations or big changes, but because of something soft, quiet, and powerful. Jake and Rinsha were no longer walking beside each other by accident. They walked together because they had chosen each other, and the jungle seemed to accept that. Their small ship, once quiet and plain, had now become a symbol. Villagers came to it, not for repairs, but for advice. Young Tavari asked questions about Earth, about humans, about Jake. Some even asked Rinsha how she found someone who wasn't afraid of her claws. Jake didn't consider himself brave. He was just tired of fear, tired of running, and somehow that made him strong in their eyes. Then, one morning, everything changed again. A transmission arrived. From the Galactic broadcast channel, a popular, Alien News Network had picked up a story about the human who was claimed and stayed. They wanted to interview him and Rinsha live across all 12 systems. Jake was unsure, nervous even, but Rinsha looked him in the eye and said, "If we don't speak, others will speak for us." He nodded slowly, knowing she was right. A week later, they stood in front of a glowing hollow camera deep inside the jungle temple. Reporters from 3 planets hovered around, drones floating, microphones blinking. A blue-scaled anchor named Vraxis spoke into the lens. "We are here with the bonded pair, human Jake Forrester and Tavari warrior Rinsha. Their story has sparked debate across the galaxy." Jake cleared his throat as the interview began. "I was claimed," he said, "but I wasn't taken. I was challenged, confused, scared, but I stayed. Because she didn't force me to love her. She protected me, stood for me, gave me the choice to walk away." Rinsha stood beside him, proud and silent. She only spoke when asked, "Why did you choose a human?" Her voice was strong. "Because he sees what others don't. He has no claws, but he holds his ground. He has no scent of war, but his heart roars louder than my tribe." The newsfeed went viral. Thousands of species saw the bond that had started as a mistake and turned into a movement. Messages poured in, some angry, some inspired, some calling it unnatural, others calling it beautiful. Jake received letters from other humans living on alien worlds. Many said they had been too afraid to connect, too scared to cross the line. But now, they saw hope. They saw that it could work. If both sides respected each other on Tavari worlds, something even stranger began to happen. For generations, scent bonds were about dominance. But now, younger Tavari females were asking, what if it could be about choice instead of control? What if strength meant letting go, not holding? Tighter? Rinsha had unknowingly started a quiet revolution, not with a war, not with politics, but with love. Alien love, yes, but no less real. Then came the invitation from the Galactic Council. A conference was being organized between species with long histories of mistrust. The council asked Jake and Rinsha to attend, not as leaders but as symbols they accepted, knowing it wasn't about them anymore. It was about what they represented. When they arrived at the council chambers, everything felt large and cold. Aliens with multiple eyes, wings, or no mouths at all watched them silently. Jake stood on the platform and looked around the room. He didn't give a speech, didn't wave a flag. He simply reached out and held Rinsha's hand. Gasps echoed from all corners of the room. Tavari. Delegates stiffened, confused and unsure. But Rinsha didn't pull away. She squeezed his hand tighter and nodded once. The message was clear. This was no accident, this was no experiment, this was real. Later, when they returned home, the village greeted them with quiet pride. Not because they had gone to the council, but because they had come back unchanged. Jake and Rinsha sat together that night under the stars. Just like always. They didn't talk about fame or attention. They talked about simpler things. Trees, stars, the smell of jungle rain. Jake looked at her and whispered, "I never thought I'd be part of something bigger." She smiled. "You? We're always part of something bigger. You just didn't see it yet." He leaned his head against hers and said, "So what now?" Rinsha replied softly, "Now, we live. No titles, no war, no claiming. Just us." And as the wind moved through the trees and the jungle pulsed with life, their bond remained, not perfect, not easy, but chosen every single day. And somewhere far beyond the stars, others watched and whispered, "If a human and a Tavari can stand together, then maybe so can we."